Welcome to the Hytro Performance Podcast. I'm Dr. Warren Bradley and I'm joined today by Dan and Emma from Manchester City Women's Football Team, and we're here at the Etihad campus. So guys, can you give us a quick introduction on yourselves?
Yeah, I'm Dan, Head of Physical Performance here at Man City Women.
Awesome. Yep, and I'm Emma, I'm Director of Performance Services for the Women's Programme.
Just a quick question on how you both found yourselves in this side of the game. Did you have any specific mentors or anything that helped you get into the industry in the first place, or how was your journey to get here?
Well, for me, not really any specific mentors. I've always grown up watching football, loving football, and I was working in Olympic sport previously, and kind of looking for a new experience and a specific kind of role, and then this job came up, and I think the women's side of it actually really appealed to me. I really wanted to be involved in that in the forefront of the growth. It was the job advert went up just as the Euros were starting when the Lionesses won, and so I guess my excitement grew throughout that tournament. So yeah.
That's awesome. How about yourself?
I worked in Olympic sport as well, so I worked in military, then ballet, and then Olympic sport for 15 years.
That's really cool.
So always been involved in high performance sport, and I think the same as Dan, I think I've been really lucky to work with some incredible sports women, but also role models as women in leadership positions within sport, and I think that and being able to see that is shaped almost the journey of my career, I think. But like Dan said, I looked at the job description, and for me, there's a time where you move into management takes you away from the day-to-day delivery, and I'm a physio by trade, and that's what I love. I love physio, I love the interaction with the players, and this role allowed me to keep a really nice mix between the two, and then you're making leadership decisions with the players at the heart of it, and that was really important for me.
That's an incredibly impressive and colourful CV. Military, ballet, football. Can you talk to me a little bit more about how that's come about? You don't look old enough. How has that been your life experience?
Why are you laughing? So military-wise, I'm a physio by background, so went straight to the military after I qualified, lived in Germany, and worked out there, which was great because it was very intensive in terms of I worked on essentially a rehab centre where they sent the soldiers essentially when they couldn't work. So that was a really intensive. You were under a lot of time pressure to get people back, and then from there went to a ballet company, so the Northern Ballet Company, and I toured with them for 2 years, and that is probably the closest in terms of schedule to football, because that is relentless. There's 7 shows a week. They are rehearsing for the next show while they are performing that show. And it is, in terms of high performance, I think that is really up there in terms of the turnaround of the schedule, the ability to need to recover to perform at the highest level on 7 nights a week, 2 matinees. I think the turnover is just relentless, and so that taught me a lot. And then I worked in Olympic sport for 15 years, so swimming and triathlon mainly. But then by the time I left, I was an athlete health consultant for UK Athletics, and then did a technical leadership role for the Yorkshire region, which was great because that gave me exposure to pretty much any sport that was based out of the Yorkshire region, plus Paralympic sport as well, which again just gives you a different angle on how you've got to adapt to what you're doing and change what you're doing, but really still focusing on the end outcome, which is performance.
Yeah, you mentioned that relationship with the athletes, and it's super important, right, to get the buy-in. What would you say if the athletes were asked about your coaching styles? What were the 3 words that came to mind? What do you think they would say?
Oh, I don't know about 3 words. I think, like you mentioned it earlier, knowing why. So I think the stuff we have with the girls a lot of the time is we will disagree with them, but we try and ensure they have a voice, and then we try and explain our decisions. So a quite common process will be that they'll come to us with an idea or a solution or a problem, and then we will either fix that together, or we might say, actually, we're going to go with what we originally thought because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that we've got to a point now where they really respect the decisions that we make. They might not agree with them, but they really respect them.
I think they would say that like we're really honest with them in terms of like we're really happy to have the discussions, but if it's a no, and we tell them why. So I think that those comms, and I think understanding like the individuals like at a player level is really important, because you can almost then you can frame it around you understand why they're asking you a certain question, or and so you can frame your answer around what's going to be best for them as well. And I think that's really important. But I think they'd say we're honest and we communicate well.
I definitely think that's the most.
We talk a lot.
Yeah, that's definitely the most difficult thing, I think, moving from Olympic sport. Well, I worked in individual Olympic sports, and Emma did mostly as well. Like, you can make it completely about the individual there. You have a MDT who wrap around, there'll be a squad, but that person's individual program is that person's individual program, and it can be quite flexible. Obviously, we want to create that with a football team, but their matches all kick off at the same time. Their training sessions have to be at the same time. The gym sessions have to be at the same time, otherwise it would be chaos. So it's kind of getting the balance of we want to wrap it around the individual, but it is a team sport at the end of the day.
I think it's all based on respect mutually between you and the players as well, isn't it? If they respect you, they'll listen to what you've got to say and listen to why behind the strategies, of course, right? So I guess building upon that as well, how do you envisage your high performance setting here? How have you built that, and what do you focus on first when you're building that kind of environment?
For me, I think is the relationship bit again. Like, if we've got practitioners on the ground who the girls trust in, believe in, and know that they're invested in their personal development, that's the starting point to building a culture, and then you're able to challenge their beliefs and kind of push things forward from there.
Yeah, and I think whenever you think about high performance, you think about like the players on the pitch or the athletes, and actually for me, high performance is everywhere. So high performance is the nutritionist delivering the best standard, like gold standard, best practice nutrition. It's Dan and his team delivering that from an S&C and a physical performance perspective. It's the physios, it's everybody. So it's almost like how do we get the best out of people, and whether that's the players or staff. Like, I think that's super important. And actually, I think we've got a team of staff that are really curious, really individually wanting to get better, but individually wanting to challenge and push each other to make sure that the players and the team get better as well. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's kind of pushing them elite standards all the time, isn't it? And I guess one thing I've always wondered, and something I've seen in practice too, but it's how do you set up a kind of safe environment for people to fail, essentially, because you need to push boundaries to see what you can achieve, but you often fail while doing that. But how do you set that up in a high performance department?
Well, from my perspective, like, it's been, I guess there's a little bit of like leading by example, and I think Emma and Emma's predecessor Jamie were like good at
get
that.
Stuff wrong a lot.
Yeah, get stuff wrong loads. No, but like, everyone makes mistakes, right? So if you make a mistake, kind of owning it and being like, this is what I think went wrong, but this is what I'm going to try and do about it, and kind of role modelling that behaviour to other staff members and the girls, but then also kind of like normalising that behaviour. I think sometimes you'll see staff members come from systems where maybe the threat levels were a bit higher, and you'll see something go wrong, and that those people might start to kind of worry and, oh no, like this might happen. And whereas you see people come from other systems who are just straight away, and I remember like the first few weeks working with Emma, her being exactly like this and just going, maybe I should have done that differently, like let's sit down and review it. But the more people experience seeing that, everyone doing it together and going, actually, if I admit I'm wrong, it's only going to make me better and everyone think more of me than if I try and like push it onto someone else or pretend I've done nothing wrong.
Yeah, it's a progression, it's a growth thing, and you don't grow and learn just doing safe things and doing the same thing all the time. Like, I'm a big fan of like failing fast. Like, let's go for it, take the risk, let's push it, see where we get to. If it goes wrong or if it goes right, let's review it. I think that action and review is super important in terms of actually, even if something goes right, well, why has it gone right? Which bits do we need to move on? Which bits do we need to take forward? So I think that's really important. But like dancers, I think it's like everybody gets stuff wrong, and that's all right, and just own it and crack on. And we're doing it because we want to grow and we want to get better, and we've got a really clear goal and aim of where we want to get to, and I think that aligns people to move forwards as well.
Yeah, I think that willingness to be okay with failure is super important, and being humble about it as well, because as you said, you're instilling good behaviours into their athletes and other coaches as well. And I guess building upon those philosophies, are there any philosophies that you have perhaps taken from other sports or from general day-to-day life that you now instill in the setting here?
I've been really lucky. I think I've worked in so many different sports like throughout my career, and what's been really nice is I don't look at one sport and think it does everything really well, but I've been exposed to different things in different sports where I look at and I think, oh, like triathlon do planning really well, and actually there's elements of that that we can bring in and look at around like individual like development plans for the girls, and then athletics do some of like the events, like travelling out to events and stuff. They do it all the time, so they do that really well, and almost it's sort of cherry picking the bits that I've seen in other sports that I think work well to sort of make your own model and make your own, like, this is our way that we do at City. And I think what's been really useful for me is actually, like Dan came from cycling, we've got a practitioner that came from tennis, we've got practitioners that have only ever worked in football, and actually getting everybody's like best bits, like where are the strengths, what are the best bits, what's worked really well for you before, and like pooling that all together. So that's like that's what we do.
Yeah, I think that's really well described from Emma there, like, for once. No, I generally agree with that. I think for me, the bit about openness and reviewing and curiosity and stuff, like, I think that's a lot easier in Olympic sports, and I think that's kind of, we've brought that with us a little bit, and just the nature of having a 4-year cycle, and I guess the job security that goes with that. You know, you're probably going to be there for 4 years before that's reviewed, whereas in football it's kind of a bit higher turnover, a bit faster turnaround. The days feel more chaotic and hectic, so it's like, how do we take that kind of long-term vision approach, the ability to review and be open, into an environment which probably doesn't lend itself to that. So that's a big one. And then the big one for me from a training perspective is kind of been in elite sports for kind of 10 years. All the places I've seen it done well, it's kind of, they do the basics first really, really well. And whether that's kind of like technical stuff on the pitch and watching coaches, or whether it's trying to create aerobic qualities or force-based adaptations, it's always doing like the basics that we know work really, really well, and that's the kind of first bit to get done.
It's really insightful, and actually aligns to what I've seen in the industry more recently. I think you see more practitioners that have more strings to the bow. They've been across different sports, and therefore, as you said, you can cherry pick characteristics and apply it to your new sport. And I remember back 15 years ago when I started in rugby, they were very much rugby coaches, and that's the only place they worked. But now you just see, you know, football coaches, cricket coaches coming into clubs doing CPDs, and it's incredible to knowledge share, isn't it? It's super important. So in terms of the progress we've seen in the women's sport as well, and the support we're seeing for female athletes, what advances are you most excited about, things that you've seen or things that you're seeing to come? You know, what's exciting you at the moment?
To be honest, this is going to be a bit of a boring answer, but it goes back to what I said previously. It's like the basic stuff. For me, it's like the participation levels, the fact that, like, I spoke to my wife a couple of times. I've got a little daughter, and like seeing the amount of little girls playing football now, like on a Saturday morning, I'll take her to, if we have a Saturday off sometimes, I'll take her to like Little Kickers or something, and but you go outside and there's like 70 girls between 6 and 8 playing football. That never happened when I was a kid. And my wife's, you know, we were at the park the other day and we saw these 3 girls playing football on their own, and these 2 boys, same age, went up to them and like, oh, can we play with you? Again, that wouldn't have happened when we were kids. And so that for me is the exciting one, and I think we can get led down a bit of a path towards kind of stuff that sounds innovative, but actually the more girls playing football more regularly, training consistently with decent support from a younger age, that's going to massively help them when they get to kind of a more senior professional level.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've got 2 little girls as well, and my littlest is obsessed by football, and she plays 5 times a week. She plays for an academy. She's 7. They've already got 2 physios. They've got an S&C. And I just think actually, by the time she is 20, like her exposure to a training volume, and actually, like we talk about it all the time from like a like a physio and injury perspective, actually, if you've got a really consistent high training volume, actually from an injury perspective, you're probably in a better place to start off with. So actually, we'll have girls that have been exposed to that from a really young age and coming through with a really rich training history, which will be different to some of the girls that we have playing now that either had to go and find a boys team that had let them play, or they played with their dad in park, or like their exposure to sort of that high level competition wasn't there. And then I do think as well, like we talk a lot around that female athlete health space, but what's exciting for me links back to what you just said in terms of what we're noticing more is actually in that female athlete health space. That's not just us at Man City Women trying to do something. England women's cricket are, netball are, and so actually collaborating between, like pulling in that from different sports and actually what they've learned, what they're seeing in their high performance environments, and being able to work together in that space, I think is one of the exciting things as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's super exciting to see the women's game basically taking off at the moment, right? But there's still this disparity in understanding really between men's and women's physiology and psychology. Are there still gaps that you're seeing that are, you know, and are the gaps closing, or how do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, I think there's definitely still going to be gaps for sure. I think for me, like there's kind of little ones like previously in cycling, we kind of came to a bit of a conclusion as a team just by anecdotally seeing what the men and the women responded to training wise, and across most of the programs, it's kind of like, you know, the women can tolerate more volume, the men can do higher intensity efforts, which kind of sounds obvious, but like, has that transitioned to the way we train a football team? I'm not sure. And that's kind of, yeah, there's going to be stuff like that we won't find out until we kind of have those S&C coaches, physios working with 8, 9, 10-year-old girls for a period of time, and the expertise that develops. And then there's obviously the piece around research into female specifically. If we look at research into elite athletes, there's actually not much of it really. So if you take that to elite female athletes, you're talking about a really, really small proportion of research.
Yeah, and I think again, when we talk about like female athlete health, the go-to is people assume it's menstrual cycle, and I think actually there's so much more to female athlete health and being able to optimise performance, and knowing that from a, you know, we have players when they are 17, what they need at 17 versus what they might need from a female athlete health perspective postpartum at 32 will become completely different. And I think it's those bits that we're still unsure of in terms of, well, actually, what does that look like for an athlete coming through, like as a female, like from an adolescent into a female post-birth, like what does that look like? So I think they're questions that'll still need answering, but it's almost like the more exposure to that. We have a lot more women coming back into sport after they've had a baby, like that was unheard of 5-10 years ago. So actually I think if that keeps progressing the way it does, then actually what do we need to do in that space? How do we return players back from having a baby in the best place? So I think there's loads of questions that are really female specific. So
I wonder as well how much individuality plays into this too, because obviously there's male, female specific needs in sport, but also, as you said, there's so many different things that happen to females, right? So how much do you see individuality playing a role currently with your athletes in terms of perhaps self-led recovery maybe, or is there any self-led training? Is individuality something that plays a part in your day-to-day?
Yeah, massively. I think, like I said, there's some things you can't make individual, so like the team-based training, the tactical training, but we've got good coaches here, one in particular who's really focused on individual development, and like whether that's in team training or separate to team training, and the people like that are really, really important to it. People who really, really care about the individual development, and then we try and obviously bring that into how we work from a physical performance perspective. All our gym programs and profiling are really bespoke, and that goes from the exercises are prescribed, but also when they do gym, how they do it, the exercises they do. Exactly the same with recovery. It's one of those kind of conversations like we talked about earlier. This is what we think the best plan is. What do you think about it? They might come back with, oh, I don't like that, I would do it like this, this is what I've done previously. And again, it's that conversation of, well, this is really important, so we're going to keep that in, but we can change this out for this exercise because it doesn't, that doesn't matter too much, or you could do that on a Tuesday instead of a Wednesday because that's not the important bit. So it's those conversations. I know the physios are really, really similar in the way they work.
And I think there's the individual side of it, and then almost like I think about Sam, our nutritionist, and like fueling for recovery, and like culturally, we've got 5 Japanese players, and what they want to eat after a training session is really different to what the English girls want to eat, to what the Jamaicans want to eat. So actually, I think trying to be bespoke in that area as well, to make sure that the girls recover and fuel properly, but being really aware of like cultural differences, and actually how we can like embrace that as a team is like something that we've worked really closely with the nutritionist on.
Has your recovery philosophy changed then over the years as, I guess, industry standards have changed and understanding of nutrition and physiology has changed? Has that changed for you, or have you stuck to the same kind of script?
I think the practices we use are different, but the principles have remained the same. I think I've always, again, going back to like basics, but like obviously the first bits for us is kind of making sure that the load is correct and the training stimulus is right. Then it's can we help them sleep better, improve that, educate them on that. Then nutrition, can we help them fuel better? And as Emma said, there's things that go into that that aren't necessarily like nutrition science. It's about kind of building buy-in, making the kitchen or the cafeteria area like a nice space, and providing food that looks appealing, etc. I guess we just across the board want to be really evidence-based. We monitor really closely a lot of objective markers to give us an indication of how they're recovering, and then try and be really kind of specific with the interventions we put in based on that data. And I guess some of the modalities that we started to use are different, but the interventions are still evidence-based and come back to those basics, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. In terms of the objective data that you're capturing, what kind of stuff are you looking at?
Yeah, so we obviously do kind of, well, not obviously, but we do like a full blood draw 3 times a year, which the nutritionist and the doctor will look at, and it gives us an indication of different parts of their diet. Then we also do weekly bloods, point of care testing, which measure things like oxidative defense and inflammation, which can give us an indication of if it's inflammation, for example, do we want to do something that is going to reduce inflammation? If it's oxidative defense that is low, is that a nutritional intervention that we might put in? So it kind of is not just recovery, it's what is the mechanism behind the fatigue and how do we counteract that, just to optimise readiness.
So you're quite innovative here, clearly. What does innovation look like to you in terms of anything that's coming down the line? Have you seen anything that's happened recently? Have you innovated anything recently that you think, that's changed the game?
Yeah.
Can you talk to me a bit about that?
Yeah, I think the innovation piece is really exciting, and that's another thing about women's football that I think is really, really cool. I think that because the game is still growing, there's less cultural pressure. There's less like this is the way it's always been done. So we're able to be a bit more groundbreaking, and I think women's football's probably in a really nice spot where you've probably got a little bit more access to resource than you would in Olympic sport, but you don't have the kind of old cultural systems of men's football. So we're able to be like at the forefront. So for me, what that looks like is doing research in an elite environment as you go. And we've created a couple of really good partnerships, obviously Hytro being one, where we're looking into the different effects of BFR on those recovery markers or readiness markers, which again can make sure we're doing the right things. I think Emma's point around like fail hard and fast, like if we think something's got a good theoretical basis, the mechanisms behind it are kind of there but just not fully proven or understood yet, let's go for it and try and do it, be at the forefront, and if it's not quite right then we can like pivot and go another direction or make it slightly better. But I'd rather be trying everything we can to be the best that we can and be off the mark slightly than to go, are we just going to do what we've always done, or just copy what the men have always done?
Yeah, I think we've got 3 PhDs like ongoing at the minute. So we've got an intervention ACL PhD. Dan's doing a PhD on.
Good luck.
Yeah, on like demands of the women's game and the like physical metrics that underpin that. And then we've got a female athlete health. Like an understanding athlete health literacy and basically designing a curriculum from age stage specific female athlete health curriculum. So I think we're always like trying to push forwards in what we're doing, and like research is a massive part of that. And I think, like Dan says, trying to do research on the ground so it feels really relevant to what we're doing and the players that we've got as well.
Yeah, I think it's also super important to not just do research for research's sake and make sure it's practically applicable to the people you're working with too, right? I remember an occasion, I won't name the team, but they were giving specific doses of creatine and beta-alanine prior to training. And I asked a simple question. I said, how much red meat are you eating? Okay, you don't know. So you don't know how much creatine you're ingesting, but you're having 5.359 grams of creatine based on this research. And the nutritionist at the time was like, yeah, you make a good point. So we're actually arbitrarily giving them creatine, essentially. So there has to be specific research for a specific reason, right? And applied in the right way.
I bet that nutritionist hated you. You left and he was like, oh my God.
Yeah. We won't go into that one. So in terms of the athletes themselves and their buy-in, do you think they're typically more curious or more skeptical about something when you're introducing something, let's say, new? Now, you have mentioned, obviously, you have a close relationship with them, so perhaps trust is already there. But what is the barometer in the room? Are they more skeptical or curious?
I think curious.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I do think curious. I think they're curious, but will take some persuading, if that makes sense. So, like, they'll be open to new stuff, but if it doesn't...
It's got to work quick.
Yeah, it's got to work quick. And they've kind of got to feel it, if that makes sense. They won't be necessarily convinced by data, unless it's specific to them, which is I find really interesting. They won't really, it doesn't really matter what other clubs are doing or other teams are doing or other athletes. It's kind of, does it work for them? And so you kind of need to convince them that it would work for them, which is another benefit of doing the in-house research is if we can show, look, we're going to try this, if you like it, does it feel good? Wait, let's reflect back. Has that changed anything? Like what's kind of been the outcome of that intervention?
Yeah, I think just from our perspective, it's been really insightful to see athletes' responses to doing BFR, for example, just because it's so visceral. You can feel it working, and because of that, you get that anchoring of behaviours, you get that buy-in. So I think it's really important for an athlete to, one, understand why they're doing something, but two, also put an experience or feeling to that kind of knowledge base so that they can anchor it.
And I think especially with BFR, like they see it so much now because we use it so much in rehab. So it's almost it's a normalised practice, isn't it? So they'll see that, and actually like spreading that out into the recovery space doesn't feel like a new modality or something completely alien to them because they've seen it. A lot of them will have used it in rehab, and like you say, you feel it. It's something that has an immediate impact, and so you feel it, and therefore like that translates over to then okay, well what does that mean for recovery?
Yeah, and that's a really good point because that's a perfect example of like we use it in rehab for hypertrophy, and we do DEXs at kind of really specific points during rehab depending on the injury, and so a lot of them, a high percentage of them, will have used BFR and seen the results off the back of it and know it works, and so like Emma said, it's not a big stretch to then go, actually this can work for recovery as well.
Yeah, it's actually been a little bit different in some clubs that we've worked with in terms of they see it exclusively as a rehab device, and then you've had that little bit of a rebrand or redefinition of what BFR is. But once they understand the mechanism, and you can dumb it down obviously, it's super simple to apply to recovery, right? So we're actually here shooting today some pretty unique and cool content using the BFR in the ice baths. What do you guys think about that? You know, about the mechanisms that we've discussed a few times, Dan, and I guess it might raise a few eyebrows, right? So what's your thoughts?
I mean, I'm really excited about it because I think, well, firstly, like as we've just discussed, the feeling, we all know that cold water feels a certain way, and it's hard at the time, but afterwards you feel amazing. And then I think that's really similar for BFR. So like if you put them together, and the girls have reported this, and this is what I've felt when I've done it, is like you almost supercharge that. So you like feel doubly amazing afterwards, which is like, that's a great start for any modality. But then secondly for me, like, yeah, it's those mechanisms, isn't it? So we would advise them not to go in the cold water during certain periods when we're trying to get certain adaptations, particularly for strength. But obviously BFR kind of has some of the opposite mechanisms, so increasing muscle protein synthesis and other anabolic signals. So potentially and this is exactly what we talked about again in terms of the theories there, but it's not been directly researched yet, but potentially there we can use the cold water as a recovery modality alongside BFR and continue to get strength adaptations, or maybe the blunting of those adaptations isn't as much. So that's really exciting for me, because if that's proven to work, that's brilliant. We can keep using cold water more regularly.
I mean, that's the next step, isn't it? Let's look at the mechanisms in the lab, and we'll actually prove that those mechanisms are synergistic. But in principle, how have the athletes fed back kind of anecdotally or subjectively using the product, either before, after, or during the ice bath? Has there been any kind of standout moments that have happened?
Yeah, I just think it's that feeling, it's the kind of the flush when they kind of open the straps, and anecdotally, a lot of them reporting feeling less sore the next day, feeling better straight afterwards, and kind of with whatever activity they're doing it with. And yeah, particularly the cold water, like I said, it kind of seems to double up that feeling afterwards.
So what kind of conversations do you have with the athletes? Is it more typically around the science, or is it more about empowering them to take ownership of their recovery, or a combination of both?
Yeah, combination of both, really, I think.
Depends on the athlete, doesn't it?
Yeah.
In terms of their interest and like how scientific they want to get. Like some of the girls have got no interest, and they just want to know that it's quick and it'll work and they feel better afterwards. And the data that we collect supports that and says they're feeling better as well. Whereas we've got some girls that'll want to know a little bit more, like why does it work? What's it doing? Like why does it feel like this? So I think it's really specific to the individuals, and that's almost how you get the buy-in again, like making sure that they understand, the ones that really want to understand the science behind it, understand the science.
Yeah, and I think that recovery for me is probably an area where I put more focus and more emphasis on how they feel and what they want to do, because there's obviously like the psychological part of recovery as well, and we know the placebo effect is pretty strong when it comes to recovery. So it's definitely one of those where we go like, this is the science, this is kind of how it works. We recommend you trying it, but if you really don't want to do it, that's absolutely fine, whatever works for you. But it's kind of, we want you to be doing something.
I mean, you guys, as I said already, are very innovative in the way you're delivering your recovery and training strategies. Do you see there's anything that maybe you guys are doing, or externally other people you're seeing are doing, that aren't yet mainstream, that you think in the next 5 years will perhaps be mainstream?
I think it's probably more about what Dan mentioned before, in terms of really being really specific in terms of matching the modality of recovery with the modality of fatigue almost. So being able to bespoke that a little bit more, I think, because like Dan said, we've got the basics. We know the different modalities, but being able to match that to maximise recovery, I think more people will go down that route.
Yeah, and I think actually it's a route to being. I know there's a lot of talk in football and other sports around kind of I don't know, adding more into their lives in terms of like testing and monitoring, but it's kind of like we can reduce the intervention almost if we know exactly what's going on, or we can monitor someone's bloods over a period of time and they show they've recovered really, really well from games and training. Like, we have to do less with them afterwards. It's about us trying to be really efficient with their time and what we do with them.
So I guess it's more about better education and better frameworks to work from, and kind of piecemeal together something that works. And are you sore, are you tired, are you fatigued, what is the mechanism we're trying to achieve? Because I remember, again, sorry for all the stories, but just like the point system, for example, that a lot of teams used, and I see value for gamification. It's cool to add points and hit 100 or whatever, but if we're not solving the need for the athlete and we're just arbitrarily throwing, if you do these things, you'll accrue these points and you'll get better recovery, that's not necessarily true. We might not want to do an ice bath for whatever reason, because we're not trying to blunt adaptation. So Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think it's more about the frameworks and education versus specificity, I guess.
Yeah.
If you could bottle up one lesson from inside kind of the walls of Man City and what you guys have learned here, and allow it to go out to the public or to other teams, what would that lesson be? What would that valuable nugget be?
So the public can have it, but not the teams.
Ignoring the teams.
For me, it would be, I think Emma said it right at the beginning, it's that collaboration piece, like 5 brains are better than one, no matter what it is, like getting together to discuss the best way forward in something, and getting together to discuss like why something might have not gone well or why something did go well. You're always going to come to a better outcome, having different brains, different thoughts, different experiences, as Emma said, from different sports. Like that's really, really key.
Yeah, and it's the people within that. Like I think making sure we've got people that are curious, that want to get better themselves as well as want to make the players better, like that's so important, because then you create that environment where actually people are really willing to have those discussions. And I think what we like when things go wrong, we're really good at discussing it, but also like making sure that we regularly discuss it when it's gone right as well, and getting a real like in-depth understanding of, well, like why is this going all right at the minute? Like why are we doing well? Because otherwise, like you don't capture anything to put in for the next season. And I think football's so relentless from a schedule perspective. What we don't want to do is be that team that just review at the end of the year. Like it's almost making sure that we've got those touch points all the way through this. However busy it gets, that time gets protected, that we can review and really get a deep understanding of what we're doing and what impacts we're having and why, and then make sure that we keep the bits we want and get rid of the bits we don't want.
And what about protecting your own time for yourselves and for your own recovery, I guess? Do you have any special things that you do or special places that you go to, mindfulness? Is there anything that you practice?
I was going to say a Prosecco.
That's perfect.
Proven,
as well.
isn't it?
Just good coping mechanism.
I'm doing
Not
research.
champagne.
Yeah, I'm
Sure, you were on
researching
champagne
it.
last night.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I don't know, it's just trying to protect family time as much as possible.
Yeah.
It can be really hard, but yeah, try and do that. And then I'm fairly dependent on exercise as well. Don't know if that's that healthy, but yeah.
Addicted to exercise.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Good man.
Yeah.
Yeah, same, like spending loads of time with my family, and then I play netball, so something competitive that can get the
Okay, the
northern
competitive
aggression
juices.
out. Yeah.
Been sent off a few times, haven't you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Only once
that's
this
another
season.
podcast. though.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just I think just making, like you say, it's just making sure you've got a bit of space for yourself, and whether you do that out for a walk or you do that playing competitive sport, I think just making sure that people have got a bit of time. And I think that's actually from a women's game, like we value that, and actually like we're able to rotate the staff, and it's not old school, well, if you're not here, you're not doing your job. Like I'm pretty hot in terms of let's make sure that people get enough time to recover and be focused when they're here, and actually deliver when they're here, and have some decent time off.
And that's, I massively believe in that in terms of actually delivering at your best as well. Like I've seen in everywhere I've worked, there's people who just come in every single day and it's their life, and they're almost always less effective than people who are a little bit more balanced but still work hard. And so there's times when we've all had to be like, okay, right, you actually need to take a day off there. Make sure you book some time. We can cover, we can rotate, because actually that's when people can switch off, come back in a better place. It gives you time to think, it gives you time to reflect and review on your own practice and what you've done. And I think it's amazing when you see sometimes those people who don't like to do that as much, then go away and just have a couple of days off and come back, and the difference in their persona, their engagement, their enthusiasm for the role, just means they're going to perform better. And I think that's something we kind of want to keep hold of in women's football, and for the girls as well. I think there's some really good stuff within the fixture programme at the moment in terms of like a winter break where there's it's a month over Christmas where there's no fixtures, so the girls generally always get 2 weeks off, and that's really special and important. You don't get that in many professional sports.
Well, I mean, that's an incredible environment you guys have set up, and a big positive, I think, to underscore this podcast and say thank you very much for your time today, guys. It's been incredibly insightful, and I'm looking forward to continuing this relationship moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Warren.
Cheers, guys.